Hello and welcome to a quick look video. Now today I'm going to be showing you a YS engine that I got off of eBay just recently. Now this is an engine brand that I told myself that I would never buy again in a used form. Well, unfortunately, look what I did. I bought a used YS engine. And the reason I said that back then was because every YS engine I had seen, which wasn't all that many, but a lot of them I had seen in person and in video or in advertisements, looked like they were seriously abused and misused, and the average modeler typically didn't know how to operate these things, so that tended to make me think that, you know, they could need a lot of parts replaced if you bought a used one. Well, and then of course, you know, there's the complexity of trying to find parts for YS engines, where there are several locations, but they tend to be pretty expensive too. Needless to say, I ended up buying this YS engine. Now, this is a YS FZ140, and that's all the advertisement said, so I'm assuming, okay, well, I got the YS FZ140 Sport model. Well, that's not what it turns out that this is. And I'll explain that a little bit more here coming up. But here I just showed you some images of this engine. Now what I want to do is I want to read to you the message response I got from the seller of this engine, because I asked him some questions about it. And I'm reading this verbatim from what he sent me. Hi Dave, thanks for buying my YS engine. It is a great engine. So the story is, a good friend bought the engine new about 5 years ago. He built a QQ Yak 54 73-inch span and ran a tank or so through it on the ground. He was afraid to fly the plane. I recently bought the plane from him and my flight timer said a little over 7 minutes flight time. I don't fly 3D, so I sold the plane to a friend and kept the engine. I checked and set the needles per manual and valve lash and it ran great. Matter of fact, I have never seen a glow engine that can idle so long consistently. That's the magic of fuel injection. The prop I used was an 18.6 carbon fiber. I'm including a new check valve, header pipe, and muffler. I ran Curtis Youngblood 3020 fuel. Plug is a new OSF. So, according to that, this is a very low time engine, which was kind of what I suspected when I looked at the ad, the images in the ad. Now, there are only 4 pictures in the ad, but as he stated, he bought a new header and exhaust. Now, this is the header and exhaust that came with it, and I don't know a whole lot about YS engines. The only exhaust I've ever seen like this was on my FZ53. So I don't know what the part number of this exhaust is, or if this is even the right exhaust for this engine. Luckily for me, in my parts bin, I happen to have a nice looking header here. Now I don't know if this is an OS header or what, but it fits perfectly and it really kind of makes this YS look a little bit more badass. It kind of makes it look more like those the F120s that I ran on my channel earlier. But anyway, so I was looking at this thing and I set it up on my wood vise, and I was just going to test out the regulator to make sure that it has compression and that it can pressurize the fuel system. So I downloaded a PDF for the YS FZ140 Sport, because that's what I thought. I didn't know there was different 140s, and the review article I'm showing here is from 1997, and as far as I knew, that's the only review article I found on a YS FZ140, so I didn't know any different. Ignorance on the part of me as far as YS knowledge. Anyway, so I hooked up the plumbing just like it shows in the diagram for the 120 Sport, and I'll show both the diagrams for each of those plumbing diagrams here. And nothing was happening. It wasn't pressurizing the fuel tank, it wasn't drawing fuel. So I was getting a little bit concerned about the honesty of the person that sold me this engine. But then, I didn't even notice it at the time, I noticed that this engine has these 2 rear ports. And I was like, obviously they get connected to something. Let me pull all these tubes off of here. So on this particular YS engine, you've got this line, and I'm just going to call them what they are as far as the function. This line is for fuel inlet, or this fitting is for fuel inlet. This one is for tank pressurization. I believe that's correct. At least up for the 140 Sport and 120. This connects to the carb. So on the 120 and the 140 Sport, that's all you had. Well, this, I found out, is actually the 140-2, which is different. So it had these two, and I didn't notice those initially, which I was like, what the hell is going on with that? I didn't notice that. So I figured, well, that's probably the problem why it isn't pressurizing the tank and doing what it's supposed to do. So luckily for me, I was able to find a manual for the 140-2, and it clearly shows how you correctly plumb this thing. So on the bench, I had this thing, it was actually on my wood vise. I had it set up with a tank with a little bit of fuel in. It didn't even matter if it was a full tank or not, because it's going to be a pressurized system. So I started rotating the prop over just as the manual says, and sure enough, it pressurized the system, and several times I unplugged the wrong fuel line, and fuel from the tank went shooting out because it's a pressurized system. Anyway, I'm pretty impressed with this purchase. This is a very nice FZ140-2, and you know, I'm probably going to do a box to the bench run, although I've already kind of done a quickie run with this engine, and here's a little bit of a teaser on that. But there'll be definitely some runs done with this. I had an APC 1612 or 1610 prop, and I went and bought off of eBay a 1612 APC. Now I had some other wood props, but when it comes to one of these YS engines that's so powerful, I don't really want to trust a wood prop. So I do have APC props that I'll be running on this, and I had reset the low speed needle, and the regulator was pretty much already set. It was fine, and it runs. Believe me, it runs, and you're going to find out very soon how well this engine runs. But for now, that's my quick look at this beautiful YS FZ140-2. Thank you for watching.